Good afternoon, good morning, greetings wherever you are across the US or around the world. Great that you're joining us again for our quarterly deep dive into the latest travel trends and research with future partners. This is our Destination Decisions edition. Every year for the last decade or more, we've done a deep dive into how and why people choose to travel to particular destinations. And today we're delighted to be joined by some very familiar colleagues from across the industry. I'm joined by my very good friend and colleague, Debbie Johnson, Senior VP here at Miles Partnership, and she's going to be moderating a extraordinary panel. Tamara Pygott, Kristen McGrath, and Vic Isley from three destinations that have gone through some very challenging times over the last few months or few years. They'll be talking about recovery from natural disasters in each of their very special parts of the world and what are some of the lessons and insights that they can share. Before that, Erin Francis Cummings will be sharing the latest research on both traveller sentiment and the latest research on destination decisions, how people are influenced, what media are they using, and then some specific research on natural disasters. We'll then move on into the panel discussion. Please ask any questions. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end. And we are sharing all the resources from today will be available online. That will be the webinar recording, all the slides. There'll be a whole range of other resources from our three wonderful panelists as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Erin, very familiar face. Erin's going to share the latest research and then we'll come back with our panel. Thanks again. Over to you, Erin.
Thanks, Chris. Well, hello from San Francisco, everyone. Welcome to a current look at the factors driving destinations decisions with insights powered by Future Partners, the State of the American Traveler. We at Future Partners are market research firms serving insights that shape winning strategies for travel, tourism, and hospitality leaders that capture hearts, minds, and market share, unlocking opportunity for our clients powered by insight to bring the future of travel within reach. If you are new to these quarterly deep dives, the findings shared today are generated from Future Partners' ongoing The State of the American Traveler study. The State of the American Traveler is based on a monthly tracking survey that collects a minimum of 4,000 unique completed responses from a nationally representative sample of American travelers. And after we collect the data, it's weighted by geography and demographics, so it's reflective of the actual American traveling population. And my findings today represent data collected between February 15th and 22nd, and they have a confidence interval of plus or minus 1.55%. And this study has been conducted since 2006, in its 19th year. And I want to take the opportunity to thank Miles for their longtime partnership in the creation of this really valuable informational source on travel trends and behaviors for our industry. So today I'll be covering in this order: current travel sentiment, factors influencing destination decisions, media resources' role in destination decisions, and finally to transition over to our panel, data on travel sentiment during a crisis. So to put the learning about how travelers' destination decisions in greater context, let's start with an overview of current travel sentiment. So I'll walk you through a number of the most relevant traveler sentiment metrics that we track. And what you'll see in the data, or what we see in the data and what you will soon see as I share it with you, is that despite extraordinary uncertainty, traveler sentiment remains largely positive right now. Nevertheless, travelers' concerns about the future are clearly evident, signaling some real caution in their outlook. So when asked about if they are better or worse off financially now compared to a year ago, 32.7% of American travelers feel better off now, and this chart is showing you that metric from 2022 to present. So American travelers' assessment of their current financial situation marks a 4-month high, and it's on par with what we saw in 2024 and is above 2023. When asked to think about their household's finances and if they feel that now is a good or bad time to spend on leisure travel, 36.7% say yes, right now is a good time. Again, looking at this metric historically, confidence in spending on leisure travel is, although not dramatically, amongst the highest this metric has reached in the past 2 years. When asked to think carefully about how they expect to spend their income in the next 3 months, 59.5% say travel will be at least a somewhat high priority. In fact, this is an increasing number of travelers reporting that they will make travel a budget priority in the near term. It's at a 5-month high and up over 5 points from 1 year ago. The average annual leisure travel budget American travelers reported this last month was $5,898. This is now at a near record high and over $1,400 above the 38-month average. And not only do 92.3% of American travelers have existing travel plans right now, but the average number of leisure trips they have planned over the next year reached 4 trips, which is in fact a 5-year high. 30% of American travelers have 5 or more leisure trips planned in the next 12 months. And when asked to rate how excited they are about travel in the next year on a scale from 0 to 10, 87.5% register higher levels of excitement, an average of 8.2 on that scale, and that's consistent with the last 2 years. However, in spite of all of this enthusiasm for the now, Americans are exhibiting notable concerns about the future. Now, 41.9% of travelers expect an impending recession in the next 6 months, and that's nearly 20 points higher than the 23% who don't. This is a notable increase in a year. And when asked if they feel that a year from now they and their households will be better off financially or worse off, or just about the same as now, 46.2% expect their financial situation to improve in the next year. And while that may sound positive, it actually represents a sharp drop in their confidence about their financial future. American travelers' optimism about their financial outlook hasn't been this low in 2 years. So with positive travel sentiment for the present, but an increasingly anxious outlook for the future, how are Americans making their travel destination decisions? Let's look now at some of the factors that influence this. I'm going to begin on more of the intrinsic motivation and values level to help shed light on the emotional part of destination decision making. So when we look at travelers' passions, what they're most interested and excited by, we see that food, history, and international travel are clearly top for the majority. This is followed by concerts and shopping, then theme parks, fitness, health, and wellness, and attending professional sporting events. Concerts and pro sports are so high in what people are passionate about. Certainly, destination decisions are made around these events, clearly. But the travelers can be motivated by more ongoing destination factors like the food scene, historical attractions, and shopping opportunities. If we zoom into passions by generation, there's some interesting differences. Food and international travel are top across all the age groups, but Gen Z stands alone in rating fitness and video games as being a top passion of theirs, while millennials rank theme parks in their top 5. Boomers, however, are the only generation to assign theater and plays a top 5 rank. Additionally, historical sites are of greater interest to millennials and older, while shopping is a top passion for Gen X and younger. All right, so we asked recent overnight trip takers to please think about why they took their most recent overnight trip. And we asked them which of the following played a role in your decision to take this trip. So after visiting friends or relatives, it's relaxation and de-stressing that are the top reasons for travelers' most recent overnight trips, followed by exploration, self-care, nature, culture, and romance. Age and generation play a significant factor, though, in travel motivations. Escaping the stresses of daily life is a peak motivator in the life stage that millennials and Gen X like me are in. Note also that escaping stress has increased as a factor over the last year. For self-care, that appears to build in Gen Z and peak for millennial age and then decline. And our Gen Z travelers are the likeliest generation to be inspired to travel by education and personal growth, with this dropping sharply with older generations. Boomers are the least likely to have been motivated to escape the stress of their daily lives, self-care, or education. They're actually the most driven to travel by connecting with friends and family. We also asked which of the following specific travel activities were important in your decision to take your most recent overnight trip. We see dining and shopping activities were by far the most important to travelers' decisions. However, following these is outdoor activities and visiting historical sites. Then we have museums, state or national parks, and meeting and interacting with local people. Social media content was a destination decision driver for more than 1 in 5 Gen Z, a stat that was interestingly similar to millennial age travelers last year, but that has now fallen in half. I don't know if that's a maturity thing for millennials, but again, very interesting. Our millennials are actually now the likeliest generation to have been motivated to travel recently by museums. Younger travelers overall are likelier to be motivated to travel specifically for a professional sporting event like NFL, NBA, and MLB. So what about the role of luxury on destination decisions? When we ask agreement with the statement, having luxury travel experiences is usually an important part of my leisure trips, 43.1% overall agree or strongly agree with that sentiment. But prioritizing luxury experiences is peaking with millennial age travelers who are 10 points above that average. And our Gen Z and our Gen X at 45%, and our boomers 10 points below that average at 33.6%. What about who you travel with? We asked about solo travel, and 31.9% of American travelers said yes, they had indeed taken a solo trip in the last year, a rate that is stronger amongst younger travelers overall and with men. We also asked about interest in multi-gen trips. 42.9% agree they are interested in taking a multi-gen family trip. This is strongest amongst our millennial age travelers. What about environmental or sustainability considerations? 28.4% of travelers agree that sustainability considerations are important to their destination decisions. This is down though more than 7 points in the last year, but it is indeed stronger amongst our younger travelers. Let's look at the role of politics on destination decisions. We ask, I often avoid or select my leisure travel destinations based on my personal political beliefs. Looking at the percent to agree, political disagreement is a destination deterrent for less than 1 in 5 travelers now at 18.4%, and that is down 4 points since last year. When we dig deeper, so we find that it's our younger travelers, particularly our Gen Z at 34.6%, who are much more likely to agree that a destination's politics can be a deterrent. By household income, those making in the 100 to 200K range were more likely than others to agree a destination's politics can be a deterrent. And I want you to note that LGBTQIA+ and travelers with disabilities are also more likely to avoid destinations because of the political atmosphere. So let's examine something happier now, pets. Pets indeed are likely to be a destination decision factor at times. Nearly a quarter of American travelers took their pet on a trip with them in the past year. And in light of the economic outlook perceptions I shared earlier, let's look at how financial factors and affordability play into these decisions. More than 45% of American travelers report they have used credit card points and rewards for trip purchases in the past year. And in fact, nearly 3/4 say travel rewards programs are important to how they generally plan their travel. And looking further into how financial aspects and affordability will play out in decision-making in the near term, we asked those with summer travel plans how much of a priority each of several factors would be for their travel this summer. And we asked them to use this scale that you're seeing from top priority to not a priority and rate that. So let's look at the percent who picked the top 2 box, so a top or high priority for these factors that we tested. So based on the findings, summer travelers will be looking to redeem rewards and find budget-friendly hotels and destinations. 42.3% will highly prioritize using rewards and loyalty programs. 37% will be prioritizing booking budget-friendly accommodation. 33.5% will be opting for budget-friendly destinations. 32.2% will be sticking to a strict travel budget. 31.9% will be driving instead of flying to save money. 31.9% will be traveling during off-peak times. And 31.2% will be focusing on free or low-cost experiences. There's somewhat lesser willingness to reduce food and restaurant costs, as well as visiting places closer to home and splitting costs with travel companions. So with nearly a third of summer travelers saying they're going to be prioritizing driving instead of flying to save money, let's look at general preferences for air versus car travel. We asked travelers if they prefer to travel by air or car, and 45.6% overall prefer air. But again, we see a generational divide. Our younger travelers much more into air travel, where it's a straight line on this chart up for car travel preference, with 34% of our boomers saying they prefer the road. All right, now let's look at where travelers want to go and how that's influencing them right now. Starting with domestic destinations, we ask an open-ended question: which domestic destinations do you most want to visit in the next year? Write in up to 5. And New York, Florida, Las Vegas, and California top American travelers list of most desired domestic destinations. Now let's go global. This month, a record high, 48.2% of American travelers say that they are likely or very likely to travel abroad in the next 12 months, outweighing the 43.1% who say they're unlikely. That is up 8 points in a month and nearly 17 points above where we were 1 year ago. So who are the travelers driving this record result? International travel intentions largely driven by age. 61.9% of Gen Z say they're heading on an international trip. 53% of millennials, compared to just 42.4% of boomers. But the greatest driver is income. 74.1% of those with a household income above 200K will travel internationally this year, and that's 3 times the rate of those with a household income of 50,000 or less. And to some degree, it's geography. 53.7% of those residing in the Western US will take an international trip versus 38.1% who live in the Midwest. Parental status, 57.5% of parents of school-age children will be traveling internationally this year. And the most popular international destinations Americans have on their minds include Italy, Canada, Mexico, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Interestingly, Canada has inched up in Americans' travel aspirations. It replaced the UK in the #2 spot behind Italy. All right, so let's now look at travel planning and resource usage and how those work together to influence destination decisions. The first data I'm going to share with you is a compilation of travel planning resource use, trust, and importance that we provided respondents with a list of varying travel planning resources, and we asked them these 3 questions. How frequently do you generally use these to plan your leisure trips? How much do you generally trust the opinions and advice of each of those factors to help plan their trip? And third, please consider how important these resources are generally to you in picking the destinations that you visit. And we then map these 3 data points on a single chart. Well, the level of importance is denoted by the size of the bubble on the chart. The y-axis, the higher it is, denotes more trust. And on the x-axis, the frequency of use. So more frequently is used, it's to the right on the x-axis. All right, so let's walk back in time to 2016. Here's how this visualization looked 9 years ago. So face-to-face, word of mouth, out on the right alone. We've got reviews, websites, official social media, Google in the middle, hotel staff, DMO, friends on social in the third layer, and online video in a bottom layer. All right, so let's come back to 2025. How frequently are these resources used to plan trips? This chart is showing the top 2 boxes on the scale of frequency use for each resource that we tested. So it's friends, face-to-face, review sites, relatives, and online video taking the top spots for frequency, lesser frequency on magazines and newspapers. So moving on to trust. How much do travelers trust these resources? So friends, relatives, and hotel staff and concierge and official visitor information centers accessed in destination, those take the top spots for the amount of general trust that travelers place in them. And finally, in this exercise, importance. How important are these resources to how destinations are selected? Importance, closely following trust with friends, relatives, and hotel staff up there, but also reviews websites and the websites of travel businesses. So let's look at these mapped out. So in the top left, a quadrant that has gotten a lot more crowded in the last decade. We've got friends and relatives and word of mouth, essentially, and hotel staff, concierge, and review sites up there in that quadrant. In our middle tier, friends and relatives via social media, travel business websites, and DMO resources. And in that tier following, we have digital influencers and streaming services. And in our up and coming quadrant, we've got podcasts, live streaming video, as well as some older media like magazines and newspapers. And for the DMOs with us, here is a call out of where DMO resources fit. So really squarely in that central quadrant, not on the top right, but performing well on all three metrics. So let's look at changes we've seen from 2022 to 2025. We've seen the largest gains in frequency for hotel staff and concierge, review sites, and friends, and online video. Losses are in face-to-face travel agents, newspaper travel sections, but do note that those are small declines. Changes in trust in the last 3 years. Overall, a big shift in trust, but biggest gains for hotel staff and concierge, friends via social media, coworkers via social media, podcasts, and DMO social media. Travel agents have actually gained trust over the last 3 years, even though they experienced a small loss on frequency. I mean, it's small, but the biggest declines in friends and relatives, face-to-face, and influencers. All right, changes in importance, nearly a 19-point gain for hotel staff, also 14-point gain for friends face-to-face. Reviews sites and coworkers and DMO websites also gained in importance. And we see no losses here. So that really is showing an exhibition of an increasing perception of resources overall amongst travelers. And when we ask a different question, we get a similar result in that word of mouth still reigns. We ask travelers to think specifically about how they get their inspiration for the destinations they want to visit and what they typically use. 2/3 say direct contact with friends and relatives. And on the digital side, online media is approaching 50%, and opinions of friends and relatives via social media approaching 30%. And when we look at how this has changed over the last 6 years, that's 2019, you're seeing in gray there, we see both word of mouth and online media and social media have made gains, offline media at a slight decline. Another source of influence for destination decisions is this group here, our travel advisors. Note that more than 18% of American travelers have used a travel advisor in the past 12 months. And here are Americans' top destination inspiration sources. We've got websites, email, social, and streaming on top. Let's look more specifically at social, given its importance. There's perhaps no greater way in which the generations are different in their travel inspiration than in their media. So this is showing top social media use by generation. This is Gen Z. So when it comes to the ideal place for them to receive travel marketing, TikTok has remained steady, but there has been a recent rise in both Instagram and X. And here's inspiration sources amongst millennials, similar but less dramatic increase on Instagram and steady on X, slight dip on TikTok. Then X similar in rise in Instagram, slight uptick on TikTok. And finally, our boomers, a 1 in 5 use Facebook for inspiration, travel inspiration, that's been steady. Very small rise in others, but also fairly small usage. In addition to use for inspiration, more than half of travelers also use social channels to plan their trips. Over a third of travelers rely on DMOs to help with their trip planning. And historical use of DMOs to help with trip planning has mildly fluctuated over the last few years, but it has largely remained steady. Also note that more than a third, 36.1% of American travelers regularly listen to podcasts. And AI tools, using AI for travel planning, it's yet to reach a critical mass, is currently at 17.4%. However, the expectations for AI are clearly there, and the deliberate use of AI tools for travel is rising this year. And it's now over a third of Gen Z saying they're specifically using AI tools for travel, and almost 3 in 10 millennials. And in addition, a quarter of travelers in the 200K plus household income range use AI tools for travel. Digital influencers still important. 21.5% use content from digital influencers to plan a trip. And that is also on the rise in 2025 so far. So let's transition to our panel segment now by looking at some data on travel sentiment during a crisis. We start with Asheville. We fielded some questions regarding sentiment around Asheville in the wake of Hurricane Helene, and these were fielded approximately 7 weeks after that disaster. At that point, 50.4% of American travelers believed that Asheville was at least partially open. 38.1% didn't know that its status. But at that point, on a really bright side, over 37% of American travelers still felt that Asheville was an appealing place to visit. If we look 3 months later, we see a 10-point improvement to the percentage of American travelers who believe Asheville is fully open and operational, and nearly a 6-point decline in those who feel that it is closed. We did something similar for Los Angeles. The first wave did overlap that crisis about 5 days. So at that time, 28.8% of American travelers thought the city was entirely closed to visitors. And nearly 2/3 of American travelers at that time said the idea of visiting LA was unappealing. And typically, LA has 55% of American travelers saying it's appealing. So a month later, just a month later, though, the perception that LA is closed to visitors has been reduced by nearly 20 points. 26.7% believe the city is fully operational. And perception of the visitor experience available in LA also significantly improved within a month of the wildfires, going from 47.6% saying the visitor experience was seriously damaged to half that number, now at 24.8%. And just wrapping up here again, what might we be able to learn from past research into destination perceptions in a crisis? Largely, the awareness varies widely by events, and negative impacts improve quickly over time. So this is showing a recall of different crises that happened in 2017 and in a 3-month window. So you'll see the ones we tested here. Again, this is just historic to give you an idea of what has happened in the past. And Lisa, we saw the impact on interest notably drop, meaning people saying they were less interested in visiting destinations due to experience crisis. That dropped 10 to 20 points within 3 months. So a recovery typically seen within 3 months. Similarly, a likelihood to delay travel to the destination, that markedly also improved within 3 months. All right, so that's a wrap on the research portion of our webinar today. It's an uncertain time. You can have access to the breadth of data we collect in the State of the American Traveler when you subscribe. And if you'd like to keep in touch and stay up to date on the latest travel insights, here is Future Partners email and social info and a link to our live stream calendar. Thank you so very much. And Chris, back to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. There's some really rich information there. So we're going to pivot now to this critical issue of recovery from natural disasters. And we want to ask a quick question of all the attendees today. So we're going to bring up a survey question here that will ask you to indicate, you can tick all that apply. So which areas of disaster preparedness has your destination organization, whether you're working at the DMO or you might be aware of the DMO in your destination, and or the tourism industry more broadly, which of these areas has the DMO or tourism been actively involved in? So just indicate those areas, everything from risk assessment of hazards, specifically around tourism, its impact on tourism, the hardening of infrastructure related to tourism, emergency training of tourism businesses, visitor evacuation planning, crisis communications, particularly, for example, making sure you've got alternative methods of connecting with people, for example, satellite phones if the mobile network goes down, reserve funds, a critical issue, and the topic we'll be addressing today in some depth, recovery, destination marketing. So let's wrap up the survey and have a quick look at the results. Okay, so we can see here that crisis communications at around 2/3 is the biggest area that people are indicating that they've been actively involved in. Up there, in fact, just topped by destination marketing in the recovery phase, both at around 66 to 70%. You can see much smaller percentages across some of these other critical areas, and arguably tourism can, should, and really must be at the table in all of these areas, working with your other agencies to ensure that you're prepared for a disaster. Okay, we'll be sharing those results out. Let me pass over now to my very good friend and colleague, Debbie Johnson, who's going to reintroduce the panel and moderate a discussion. Over to you, Debbie.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Let me get my video started there. I just wanted to let you all know, first off, thank you, Aaron, for all that information. I always love your webinars, always get information. We have 3 amazing panelists with us today. I hate to say I'm excited about this panel because it's such a somber subject, but I am excited to learn the things that we can all do better. So with that, I'm excited to introduce, we have with us Vic Isley from Explore Asheville, Kristen McGrath from the Pasadena Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Tamara Pygott from Lee County, Florida Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we are going to dive right in because we don't have a lot of time and we've got a lot of questions to get answered. Please, if you have questions, make sure you ask them in the chat or in the Q&A. We would appreciate that. So really, to start with you guys, I'd love to ask the question. You've all been through a very, very challenging time in your destination. Can you please take a moment and just remind us about the disaster that hit your destination, kind of the impacts that it had, and where your tourism industry is now in recovery? And we're going to kick it off, if we can, with Tamara.
All right. Well, this is where we started. September 28th, 2002, about 161 mile an hour, very strong Category 4, almost Category 5 hurricane. Hovering, unfortunately, for about 8 hours off the coast of Fort Myers, and then, of course, eventually coming on land and making its way through central Florida and up the East Coast, well, at least portion of the East Coast of the U.S. Caused $122 billion in damages. It was the 4th strongest storm to ever make landfall in the state of Florida. In our community, about almost 5,100 homes were destroyed. 300 businesses were destroyed. We lost bridges and ways to connect to islands. It was a real challenge. Thankfully, it's 902 days later, and we're moving along. I'm going to share this slide very quickly with you today, but I want you to know that the Miles team is going to have it posted so that you can dig in with it a little bit. Immediately following the storm, we developed a 4-phase recovery plan, and it feels like we've been stuck in phase 3 forever. But we have been in phase 3 for a long time, because phase 4 is full recovery. And quite frankly, it's going to be a while before we are fully recovered, because on the next slide, you will see that as a result of the storm, I lost a significant portion of my coastal hotel rooms. And we are still down more than 2,600 hotel rooms. And this number is not changing significantly over the next few months. We have a few more that are going to get open, and then it's a rebuild process. And so we have a long way to go, but have also learned a lot and have a few things to share that I'm happy to bring to the table today.
I'm muted, of course. Thank you. That was fantastic. Appreciate you. We are now going to go next to Kristen, if she can give us an update.
Sure. So Pasadena was affected pretty dramatically by the Eaton fire, which started on the evening of January 7th. So, just a couple of months ago. After a full week, the fire was only at 55% containment. It took 24 days for 100% containment to be achieved. That happened on January 31st of this year. The Pasadena Convention Center served as an American Red Cross emergency evacuation shelter until Monday, February 17th. So literally just a month ago, the evacuation shelter at our convention center closed down. Sadly, the fire killed 17 people. It destroyed more than 9,000 buildings. The majority of those were actually in the community of Altadena, which is our neighbor directly to the north. But Pasadena did suffer about the loss of about 200 residential homes. And most sadly, of all of these data points, 17 people were killed. So it's been a really tough way to start 2025. A total of about 14,000 acres were destroyed, and we are just now sort of getting our feet under us and really starting our road to recovery.
Thank you, Kristen. We all watched that, with horror, I'm sure, and I can't wait to hear more about your story. And now, Vic, if you would answer that question for us.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good to see a number of familiar names in the chat already. So nearly 6 months ago, on September 27th, Helene ripped through Asheville in western North Carolina. And you can see some of the images that we prepared for our mayor when she was meeting in early days and hours following the storm with elected officials from all over the country. The next slide will show you that prior to the storm, travel and hospitality makes up $3 billion of our local economy, which is 20% of our GDP. And this graphic really shows how we're all interconnected and how we're really feeling this, from jobs supported for our neighbors to wages to state and local taxes. Now, there would be no time for a good time for a storm like this in the mountains of western North Carolina, but it could not have come at a worse time economically either. What you see here is, of the visitors that come to our community, 70% of what they spend is outside of lodging businesses, supporting much of our creative economy. So the next slide shows just how devastating this was economically, coming in peak season, in leaf season, and the holiday season at Biltmore. We estimate losing 70% of our visitor economy, which is about 31% of total visitor spending throughout, and $584 million. However, the next slide really shows what our community and how our community responded. The grit and gumption of Appalachian people has been on full display from the moments following the storm and even prior, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But these are just some of the efforts that we've all worked collectively on in getting our community back up and running, and look forward to sharing more of those stories as we go through our talk this afternoon.
So helpful. Thank you very much, all three of you. I'm going to go to the next question if we can. As we've talked about focusing primarily on the recovery phase of the disaster, do you have a couple of tips, kind of your most important steps in preparing for a disaster? I know you can't prepare for, some of the things that happen, but kind of using the benefit of the hindsight that you might have having lived through this, can you give folks some idea of what you would wished you would have known back then? So, and again, I'm going to keep it in the same order. Tamara, if you could kick us off.
Sure. I think every relationship you build today pays off when you have a disaster. So my best advice is, just be out in your community, building relationships with people, because you're going to need them, all of them. And make sure you have their cell phone numbers, because landlines didn't work after a hurricane, but maybe for a period of time, cell phones didn't, but they got back quicker. So just, think through how you contact people, and that you have every number you can possibly have.
That is great advice. And again, things you don't always think of. Kristen.
So we had a great, that survey, the poll that we did earlier, I thought was really interesting. I was really very proud of the crisis plan that we had in place leading up to the disaster. One of the things that I hadn't really accounted for was, yes, we have a plan if we don't have electricity or internet and all these things. But it hadn't really occurred to me that just because we have the ability to work doesn't mean we have the emotional capacity and bandwidth to actually get the job done. Because this wasn't an event that happened and then was over and we had to go about picking up the pieces, we were, it took 3 weeks for this fire to be contained. And that first week, a lot of my staff members and our neighbors, their homes were still in jeopardy. First responders' lives were still in jeopardy. And having the tools to work, but also having the emotional resilience to be able to actually do the work was something I hadn't really considered. And taking the time to just make sure that the team is working on building resilience. We've all been through a lot in this industry over the past 5 years, and resiliency is a skill that we've all had to work on, but I never really realized how important it was in a crisis sort of situation.
That's such a great point. And we're going to have a question later on talking about that impact on the personal lives of their team and community. Vic, if you could answer this question for us.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm taking a look at the slide here. That's a timeline that we put together. Is that I've been in Bermuda and Florida, and never did I think I would be working on hurricane recovery in the mountains of Western North Carolina. But even prior to Helene, we had had several days of record rains. And so we had been preparing in advance for Helene, working with our hotel partners and putting together a weather advisory for visitors, putting together hotel availability for residents who needed to get to higher ground. And you can see that ahead of the storm. But right in the throes of that is getting into working in recovery. So hotels without power or water were turning over rooms without clean linens to house first responders for our own community, as well as those who are answering the call from across the country. So really having that plan in advance is really important. And then being able to riff off of that is super important. So the day following the storm, having worked in recovery previously, is information is power, and without any power or communications, was getting down and out of our community to my parents' farm in the middle of North Carolina to get 24 hours worth of information to be able to come back into the community and help. And so it was literally working through, how do we get clean linens for these hotels? Restaurants were cooking off food that was going bad in their walk-ins for first responders and residents. It really was a day in and day out and hour by hour situation. And we have lots of notes from that from the beginning, but I just go back to Tam's point about not only having people's numbers, but knowing where to go and where to find them in person. And those are just some relationships that are stronger than ever right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think, Kristen, you said it, the resilience that the three of you each showed just in answering these questions, and what we're going to hear coming up is just really astounding. So thank you all for doing that. We're going to go on to question number 2. So I'd love to know how you work with your government, your industry, your community, when it was appropriate, to kind of be proactive in welcoming visitors back into your destination. And I know you're at 3 kind of different points in your recovery period, so it'll be interesting to see kind of where that starts. And so, Tamara, we're going to start with you, having been the longest now out there?
Sure. So we have a tiny bit of an advantage. We're a department of county government, and we are actually embedded in our EOC emergency activations. So we're embedded in the Emergency Operations Center. And so we have the best of the best information because we're literally right there. And you know, I want to add that, you know, when we talk about starting your marketing again, boy, there's a lot of opinions. Not only a lot of opinions, but a lot of different opinions. And, you know, one of my good friends, Dan Rowe, told me, no matter what you do, somebody's going to be pissed. And if you know Dan Rowe, that's exactly how he said it. But the reality is, and Dan's in Panama City, the reality is that a portion of your community is going to be up and running and able to handle this, and a portion of your community might not be able to handle this. And you have to balance that out and honestly do what you do best, and that is market your destination. And you may be sending a message that it may not be the right time to come, but you're still marketing your destination for people who are going to come the minute it is the right time to come. So my advice is you don't really ever stop doing what you do best. You do it the whole time.
Great advice. Kristen?
So, you know, the fire broke out. We immediately, as part of our plan, we knew we had to stop all advertising immediately. One of the interesting things was our visitor guide, our visitor inspiration guide had literally just been published with a whole section on hiking. And highlighting Eaton Canyon. So like immediately, like all of those we immediately started planning on having to do a reprint and pulling all of those down. As I mentioned, because our convention center served as an emergency shelter, there were a couple of things we knew. We couldn't restart our active marketing until the fire was contained and until the folks that were staying at our emergency evacuation shelter were settled someplace. We had to start making calls to our clients. I'm so happy to report all of our clients, there are 18 groups that were impacted. All of them could not have been nicer with regards to, you know, finding alternate dates or having to cancel. But it was truly a partnership. As Tam said, lots of people had opinions as to when it was appropriate to start our advertising again. But we didn't have to take the lead. Visit Pasadena, the CVB didn't have to take the lead on this. We actually were hearing from our small business owners in Pasadena that 9,000 buildings had been destroyed. Our built-in audience of shoppers and people that dine out in restaurants, our locals, they were displaced all over LA County. And folks knew in order for our small businesses to make it through, to live, you know, to make it through and successfully come out on the other side of this natural disaster, we needed foot traffic back shopping and dining in our small businesses. So we actually started hearing from the neighborhood business districts, individual store owners and restaurants saying like, we need help. So that sort of helped us it granted us a permission to know when the right time to start again was.
What a great thing for everybody that you were able to do that so quickly too. Vic?
Yeah, I going back to Tam's point, it's really fun to have people tell you in social media to go pound sand. But I think if you've pissed everybody off, I think you're generally doing a good job. And I think one of the things that, you know, with Kristen's point about California and looking at Western North Carolina, which what you see here is the travel advisory map that Visit NC put out, and this is as of today. This map looked really red when we first came out of this, which was a combination of our destination marketing organizations, the state travel office, the state DOT department, whether we had potable water, all of that fed into what color coding was on this map. And what you know, if you've ever been to Western North Carolina, is that it is a lot of small mountain towns. So some of these mountain towns were not even affected. And so they were being painted with the same brush as Asheville that had no potable water, and houses and galleries that were washed off the sides of our rivers that have been protecting us for many generations. So working collaboratively with our partners and ensuring that from our mayor to the governor to our DMO partners, we're working on the same thing here is really important. And then how to turn the marketing back on, which was having Biltmore Estate, which is the largest private residence in the country, who's only been closed 3 times in several hundred years, being a partner in marking in the sand, a reopening in November 2nd, and working really collaboratively with our airport and our fly markets, working with Visit and See as the state tourism office, and then Biltmore is really starting in the center, and really making sure it was okay for us as residents to come out and support our businesses. And then going out to that drive market and that idea of returning or planning your return trip is really thinking about how we wanted to invite customers back, how to do that, and how to think about it emotionally as well as strategically was really important for us. And we're still navigating this every day.
Yeah, it sounds like from Tam's story that you may be navigating it for a while, and appreciate all that you guys are doing. I am going to skip question 3, ladies, so we can get to question 4. We'll go back if we have time, but I do want to give you guys time for question 4 and time for final thoughts if we can. So we talked earlier about kind of that personal connection that you each all had to this. I think it's important to note that you, your teams, your communities, what that impact was. And I would love if you would be willing to share a story about how you all came together and kind of showed up to support each other during these crises. So again, if we could kick it off with Tamra.
So, I got a million stories, but I want to share one that, is a little personal to me. But I was in Frankfurt at Brand USA's Travel Week when Hurricane Ian was bearing down towards my community, and didn't know how I was going to get. I was not scheduled to come home for a few days. Didn't know how I was going to get home once I decided I was going to come home. Didn't know if I'd have a home to come home to, but was going to get on a plane anyway because I knew I would be needed in my community. And so, of course, as I'm flying across the Atlantic, have to reroute myself, obviously moving flights and everything, but I'm going Frankfurt to New York, New York to Miami because they're closing the airport in Fort Myers. I can't fly into Fort Myers. And, my husband and daughter are sending me texts, which I can get on the plane. I can't see the images they're sending, but they're like, oh, we think the lighthouse is gone, or this is, they're getting reports from the community. And, I'm just sitting there literally on the plane crying. And I get to New York and I've got a pretty long layover, unfortunately, again, being rerouted. We all know what that's like. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Ursula Bull from Miles, calls to check on me because she certainly knows what's going on. And I'm like, well, I'm in New York. I'm flying to Miami. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to drive across Alligator Alley to get home. I mean, I don't know if the roads are open. I don't even know what it's going to be like. And she's like, I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Get a hotel room in Fort Lauderdale tonight. You can't drive back in the middle of the night. There's no way they'll let you. There's a curfew. I'll take you to breakfast in the morning and get you to the airport so you can get a rental car and you can go home. And, it's the little stuff that matters. I can't tell you how much I appreciate Ursula for those moments and for taking me to breakfast that morning. And oh, by the way, taking me to her sister's house so I could wash my clothes because she knew there was no way I'd be able to wash my clothes from my trip before I got home or once I got home because there was no power. Just people stepping up and doing something for you when they absolutely don't have to. And I mean, that's my story, but I got 15 of them, right? People doing things for people when they don't have to, or they're doing it because out of the kindness of their heart. And I think, man, again, those relationships you have, the things you develop, there's nothing more important when you're going through a crisis than having your friends and your relationships in your community. And, you know, and again, I know Kristen and Vic are going to tell not similar stories. I hope they tell something about their staff. My staff was amazing. Not one single person's house wasn't affected in some way from our storm, yet everybody came to work every single day and did what they had to do. One staff member had 4.5 feet of water in her house. I had water in my house. You have to keep going. There's no choice. And you know, people are amazing. And my mom said when I was a little kid, you don't know how tough you are until something bad happens. We're a lot tougher than we think we are.
And it shows through at times like this. So thank you. That's a great story. Kristen.
So I have a photo, and I just think it so January, for those familiar with Pasadena, January is a very special place for us. January 1st, Rose Bowl game. It's iconic, the stadium with the mountains in the background. This photo was taken in the middle of January. The Rose Bowl Stadium ground served as the operational command center for CAL FIRE. I had the opportunity to tour the grounds, and literally, I'm going to get choked up, but like literally to see first responders from all over California, the Western United States. Really, there were states all over this country that sent firefighters and first responders to our part of the world. There were firefighters, first responders from Mexico and Canada that came to Southern California to help fight these fires. It just was so inspirational. One thing that and I'm sure Tam and Vic can talk about this as well, but like we weren't prepared as a community for the outpouring of citizens showing up with stuff. Managing donations is something that I don't think destinations build into their crisis plan. Think about it, consider it. And it's funny, you see all these first responders doing their part. We came back, we started talking to our colleagues working at the convention center in the shelter, just asking them, what can we do to help you guys right now feel better? How can we help you? And it was funny, there's plenty of food, but our colleagues who are working said we haven't had salad in like 5 days. We're living off carbs. And just, I'm like, I can get you salads. Like that was one thing the Visit Pasadena team could do is go and bring salads to our colleagues who just, and it's a silly little thing, but it was so easy, and it made us feel purposeful while people are really doing life and death work. And we're marketers, but like, how can we help in this moment? And it was just, it gave the Visit Pasadena some comfort in helping the people that were really doing the mission critical work at that time when the fire was still going on. So that's just a silly little story I thought I'd share.
I love it. And it is the little things, that's for sure. Vic.
Yeah, I go back to looking at the microcosm of early days. I think, COVID taught us that we could work remotely, but thinking about your family first is that you have to think about your own family first, and then your work family, and then your partner network, and then building out from there. And I think as DMOs, we hold a really special role in our community where emergency management is emergency management. And part of our role and responsibility is to paint a picture. And the DMO family has been amazing. It has been for 30 years. That's why I've been in this business as long as I have. But taking that and working through how you build that into standing up for your community and being a part of those EOC meetings and speaking with those is actually Angie Briggs' son, if you know Angie. Her son actually said, Mom, Vic's speech was actually the first time I felt hopeful.
Well, if that isn't like the perfect way to end this, ladies, like I knew I was going to get choked up when you told these stories, just hearing some of it. So I want to say thank you. Thanks you for all you folks who stayed with us. I know we went a couple minutes over. We will be posting these materials. Tamara, Vic, Kristen, thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing in your destinations for your communities. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. We are here all to be supportive when we can, and I wish you all the best of luck. And again, thank you all, everyone, for being with us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Just a quick note on resources. Let me add my own thanks to such special stories and wonderful insights and really practical advice. So thank you, ladies, so much. A reminder to join us for upcoming webinars. Oh, and we've actually published an article. You'll be able to read that on some of the key insights that were shared today. Please access that, and please join us for our upcoming webinars with future partners, the special editions of the State of the American Traveller on technology in June, Traveller segments in September, and Stewardship and Sustainability in November. So thank you again, everybody. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.